Welcome, everyone. It's just wonderful to have so many people back from uh, the holiday time. Um, and we are sort of, not sort of, sorry. We are looking at Shaila Catherine's book, Beyond Distraction. And she's drawing from Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta 19 and Sutta 20. And there's lots of new people tonight that haven't been here while we've started this series. So I'm just going to very quickly recap the main points that we've covered in the book so far. And the first one is just that thoughts are mental events that we can pay attention to, which I'm sure that we've all had that experience now that we've begun to meditate. But I know for me, when I first started, I just thought I didn't really have any say or control over the thoughts that were going on in my mind. Like if I was moody. And it turns out, no, actually, these are mental events and we can be watching them and we can work with them. And last week, Sanghamitta talked about the first strategy. There's 5 strategies that the Buddha gives that he did to deal with his own mind when it was going down a track that he realized was not beneficial, was harmful for himself, harmful for others, and harmful for both. And so the first strategy that the Buddha gives, and they are sequential, you try number 1, is just when you realize that you have a thought that's got a lot of irritation in it, or impatience, or a lot of craving, is you realize that that's what's going on, and then you try and counter it, you try and deal with it, you try and replace it with something that's more uplifting, more wholesome, not so full of craving. And Sanghamitta was saying, one of the ways, like if you've got a lot of irritation, then realize what aspect of the situation or the conversation or the event that you're noticing, that you're focusing on, that you're paying attention to, and shift it. If someone's causing you a lot of irritation, then try and be paying attention to other parts of them. Remember ways that you feel endearing towards them, or some compassionate, understanding of why it is maybe they're being impatient with you, or et cetera, paying attention to a different sign. And tonight we're going to be looking at strategy 2, which is the second thing that you can try if that's like not working and your mind's not buying it, and you just stuck. The second strategy that the Buddha suggests is to take a little bit of a step back and weigh the consequences, weigh the cost of the fact that I'm letting anger stew around in my mind, or I'm letting some intense craving, or something that's even, bordering on addiction, like something that's a bad habit, et cetera, then just take a step back and weigh the costs. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And it's a little bit of a heavier approach and heavier topic. But there's a very, very powerful formula that the Buddha gives all of us. And he's, again, sharing from his own life. And I'm going to read a section of a sutta. This is in the Samyutta Nikaya. That's the collection of discourses that are collected and put together based on thematic material. So this section of this collection of suttas is put together based on the theme of the 6 sense bases. And the Buddha says, mendicants, before my enlightenment, while I was still a bodhisattva, not fully enlightened, the thought occurred to me, my mind may often stray towards those 5 chords of sensual pleasure that have already left their impression on the heart. So that's, desirable sights, desirable sounds, desirable smells, desirable tastes, and desirable touches. But which have passed, they've ceased and changed. Or, so he's remembering past things that were really delightful and delicious, and things that had left an impression on his heart. And then he realizes, or towards those that are present. So things that have happened in the past, things that are present, or slightly towards those in the future. And then it occurred to me, being set on my own welfare, I should practice diligence, mindfulness, and guarding of the mind in regard to those 5 chords of sensual pleasure that have already left their impression on the heart, which have passed, ceased, and changed. And then he goes on to encourage his followers to do the same. So the formula that the Buddha shares that he worked with when he was training his own mind, his own heart, was to understand the gratification that we're getting from any behavior, any desire. What is the gratification in this? Like, why am I, like, what am I getting out of it? And then secondly, what is the danger? And then lastly, what's the escape? This is a very important formula that we can all start to use. What's the gratification? What am I getting out of this? Thank you so much for coming. And what's the danger in me continuing on this course? And what's the alternative? What's the escape? How can I get out of this? So tonight, I want to look at that: gratification, danger, and escape. And I think it's important that we actually, when I was reading Shaila Catherine's chapter, I was getting a little bit lost, because for me, she just is bouncing back and forth between more coarse sense desires that are happening in our daily life, and then things that are actually happening when we're actively sitting in formal meditation. So I want to separate those out. So I wanted to spend very few minutes about talking about sense desires and pleasurable contacts that are happening in our daily life, and what's the gratification, and then what about on the cushion? What are some of the distracting things that are happening when we're sitting in meditation? Because they're really different. So I would love for us all to participate, because I think it's more effective, more meaningful than me just talking about my own sense desires. Plus, I don't really want to just talk about my own sense desires, ad nauseum. So I was thinking about this. And so the areas that came up for me, and what I'd like to do is just bang out some areas, that I know are struggles for many of us. And then I think it's going to take too long, because I'd like lots of interaction for us to be passing the microphone around. So I was thinking that people could just put their hand up if they're wanting to, and people online as well, and just share, a phrase like, this is something that, isn't serving me right now. This is an area, and what's the gratification? I'm realizing when I look at it, it's because it helps me to not deal with some other things that are uncomfortable in my own life or whatever. Um, and then I can repeat it so that people online get to hear. But the areas that came up that I thought of, um, just a little pet peeve. I feel like I've listened to so many Dhamma talks about sense desire about food. And I think that's a big area, but I think there are many, many more that, trip us up. So the food, okay, but I think just entertainment is a huge one, and us getting lost down YouTube rabbit holes and internet and social media and being on the phone and doing tons of texting. I think these are things that I see many, many people struggling with and it not serving them. Yeah, I think shopping is another one, getting more stuff. Sleep is another one, we can sometimes escape into. For some people, drinking. So I'm throwing those areas out. Maybe there's other areas that are up for you in your life, if you're willing to share them. And then I think the key is for us to talk about why do we do these things that actually, if I step back, I don't want to be doing that or spending as much time doing that. What are some of the gratification that we're getting when we engage in some of these behaviors? Please.
I would say that it would serve to postpone having to do what it is that we know that we should do or serve us better.
Yeah. So lots of procrastination and just putting things off and, doing the sort of fun, easy thing first. Yeah. And I know in my life, often I would force myself to do things because I was going to have a treat at the end. I was going to have some reward. I was going to watch some TV show or blah, 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 or have a glass of wine or whatever. And that for me was an operational strategy for years. And I wasn't really very present with my own experience, just grinding through and then I'm going to get a break. And I think that's another pattern some of us can get into. You were saying that sometimes you do the treat first.
Well, I think that it's difficult for us to move methodically and efficiently from one productive action directly to the next without any sort of intermission. Sometimes those intermissions can start to drag on because we never don't want to face what that next thing is. I mean, for some people, I think it's work, like literally just going to the job and then putting all your energy into that. It distracts you from the rest of life. Which can have,
Yeah, and work, he's sharing work can also really different times work can be, we can come home like depleted or under-resourced or, spent. Yeah. Anyone else? Marilyn.
I'm making very quick judgments.
Making judgments about people. Something, yeah. And can be what's gratifying about it, Marilyn?
Oh, I'm just trying to think what on earth could be gratifying about it. But I guess it just pushed me thinking a little bit better than someone else.
Yeah, I think that we can make judgments about people because there's like some identity there. Yeah. And some of these things are just, they have momentum because we've been doing them for a long time. They're habits, and it's like water. It'll run on the rut that's carved in. And it takes more energy to steer it a new way.
And also, once you get to know that person, you feel some shame because of how nice they are.
Yeah. Could people online hear that? Yeah, Marilyn's saying she'll be judgmental and then later have a regret around it because she'll meet someone and get to know them better and realize the judgments were fault. They were unfounded, misguided. I want to really, really encourage us to, this is so significant for us to understand the gratification that we're getting out of things that we're not that proud of. We would rather not be like that. Things that, you know, yeah, when New Year's comes around, you know, I just want to reduce that behavior, you know, and increase other behaviors that are much more meaningful and satisfying actually, and beneficial. But why don't we? So I'm saying this is so significant because the Buddha is teaching us to change like Ajahn Brahm has a great saying, to change out of wisdom power, not willpower. And that wisdom power is this understanding, what is it that I'm getting out of this? Because then you can untangle it. And then you can also, it takes being brutally honest with yourself. We think that we're getting something out of it, but this is what the Buddha is saying. If we really, really examine it, it's a lie. It's not delivering the goods that it's promising to deliver. It's totally illusion.
That's the word that talking, the illusion of judgment. I appreciate that comment. It's like, oh yeah, I've been there, I've done that. And it's a way of saying, I'm not doing something. And it's that creating that separation and the illusion of that separation. And that therein lies peace there. I mean, it's nice for me to talk about this now. Get me out of the street and just like anybody else, right?
Yeah. And I think it's really important that we understand that judgmental minds there, that's very much a habit, but it also, whatever's going out is going in too. So when we're finding ourselves really judgmental, we're also got quite a strong inner critic. And sometimes we're deflecting, you know, because that inner critic is being pretty mean and using pretty horrible tone of voice. And then we're deflecting it out. Yeah. Let's talk about some things that are happening for us on the cushion that are, you know, distracting thoughts that take us away from our meditation object. What are some that are common for people? And then try and think, why do I do it? What's the gratification? Great, please, Corey. Planning. And why do you think? What's the gratification?
Check off my list.
And how do you feel when you check it off your list? She said that the gratification she thinks in her planning when she's sitting in meditation is that then she can check things off the list. And what happens when you check something off the list? But what's the gratification? Check. Yeah, really important to see that, because I think sometimes we just go, oh, planning, and we stop there. And the Buddha's saying, he's giving us this instruction. If we stop and think, but why am I planning so much? What's happening when I do that? And if we realize, oh, it makes me feel good, makes me feel like I'm on, I mean, many things. For me, planning a lot of times is coming from a lot of wanting to control, wanting to feel some sense of accomplishment, like Corey talked about. I think it's really important that we understand our identities and our idea of separate self that got mentioned. A lot of it comes from doing.
Planning, so that you know, planning, so that you feel like you're doing it right, so that you can be seen as an okay person.
Huge in our culture. Yeah, and Sangamita is saying planning, so that you can get it right, so you can be seen as, productive, good, accomplished, successful. This is huge in our culture. Huge. I mean, I think that we all face this when we get sick and we can't, produce.
Does that come back to judgment of ourselves?
And all of this is rooted in just not seeing clearly, like not seeing the full picture. But even without deep spiritual insights, we can unpack this stuff and we can realize, why am I doing this? What am I getting out of it? And is that real? Yeah. You're so close. Why don't you take the
So your
microphone?
question is it real? If it generates is this on?
I hope so.
If it
Yeah.
generates a feeling, then it's real. And
Touch your chin.
I said if it generates a feeling, then it's real. And everything.
Can we talk about that?
Well, here's my other comment. Everything we do, all human activity, is for the purpose of generating a feeling. And I guess then you have to look at what is the feeling generated. Why do we want to generate that feeling? And maybe what if you just don't?
But sometimes we're generating feelings. It's based on our perceptions, but we need to really be willing to examine our perceptions, because we're not good people because we do things. I mean, we're conditioned to think that, but that's not. And so we do get that feeling, you're right, but it's not legitimate. It's a house of cards. And that's why we have to do it again, do it again, do it again. Because there's somewhere inside of us, we know it's an illusion.
Based on filters and perceptions
And
and
conditions.
not seeing reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's jump on to and I just want to encourage everyone this week, when you catch yourself like, I wish I hadn't said that, or, oh, I'm feeling really impatient, or off the cushion, or, on the cushion, like planning, or ruminating, remembering. Why am I doing this? What am I getting out of it? And can I unpack that and start to not just get, pulled along by the nose, start to step back, and because we all have enough discernment and we have enough wisdom, and start using wisdom power to generate more momentum in our meditation and our wholesome mind states, and our being on the beautiful track, than willpower, because willpower won't work. Willpower is the same stuff that our whole culture, like it's all, yay me, I'm so great, I quit that, or I took that up, or I've exercised for 40 days straight, whatever. It's still like it's not the way that the Buddha's teaching us, which is going down a really different track. So let's talk a bit about the danger. It's kind of a heavy word. Like, what is the cost? And we can talk off the cushion briefly, and then about on the cushion. What's the cost in us spending the night watching Netflix, watching 4 episodes when we set out to have a short break and do one? What's the cost? What's the downside? Please, yay, finally. And sorry, I haven't been paying enough attention. Have you had it raised for a long time?
It's okay. I
So
lowered
sorry.
it. That's okay. I was just thinking about the planning and list making and how that really takes us out of the present. It takes me out of the present. That's something that I do on the mat or on my cushion. And it can really, I don't know if it's rooted or if it perpetuates or both, but a kind of a dissatisfaction or discontentment with present life. Like it's constantly needing or wanting something to look forward to instead of just enjoying what is. So I think that is kind of the danger in it, is never really fully being in the present, enjoying the company that you're with, even if it's just yourself. And is that so hard? Not really. Like, you are wonderful company, but learning that that is true is, I think, the hard part.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, one of the dangers, planning, is it feeds itself, and it very much takes us out of right here, right now, this breath. Yeah. Please, Catherine.
Back to your
John,
question
can you
about,
just,
um,
thanks. When it's not hard, we'll just,
back to the question about what is the cost, I think, I mean, philosophically, only that philosophically, but the ultimate cost is not knowing yourself. Whatever you want to call that, if you want to call it enlightenment, that being awake, that's the ultimate cost. And so by doing these things, we're really avoiding what's occurring in this mind, body, spirit complex, and our different, getting to know those different layers of energies and dealing with the samskaras that are within us.
yeah. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's everything that we're trying to do, and these distracting thoughts and unwholesome mind states and unwholesome habit energies and habit patterns are the obstacles. And but it's so beautiful, this gratification, danger, escape, because the Buddha is saying we can tease this apart and come to understand it and understand ourselves. And I think it's true that what Amberly's saying, and Catherine, it takes us out of the present moment. And a lot of times there's, maybe some uncomfortable feelings or sadness, loneliness, and we just fill that up with activity and are not feeling it. Marilyn.
I've been worrying about something specifically and wanting to help. I want to be the one that can help a person through a crisis. And so it's I,
Mhm.
and it's learning.
Yeah, I think Marilyn talked about she wanting to help someone, and that's wholesome, but then it's piggybacked with this a worry and sort of an obsessiveness, because there's identity in it of being the one, having the answer, doing the right thing. Yeah. And so I do think it's really great when we can start to see the identities that we have, and that we're constantly trying to reinforce. And this is all a house of cards. That's why it takes so much of our energy. Yeah. Yeah, so we're back to planning. Corey's, yeah.
You know, remember Adam's history, it's all obviously. The reason is to set down. Everyone is doing this. Things that happen,
Mhm.
but not to ruminate.
Mhm.
Day.
And the most important thing, Corey, is to be able to not be planning while we're meditating. Yeah. Yeah. And it actually is the next strategy that I think, or the fourth, I can't remember, but one of the strategies the Buddha is talking about is to actually have the mind trained enough that we can notice, oh, planning, you know, maybe there's some worry there, and be able to tell the mind, yeah, it's really important. That is an important thing that does need to get thought through and does need to get planned. So I'm going to do that in an hour and actually be able to do that. Very powerful, you know. And sometimes you can also get to where the mindfulness is strong enough that you notice, oh, some unwholesome, like I'm discouraged or whatever. And then you can actually just say to the mind, no. I mean, again, it needs to be with wisdom, you know. But our minds, we can start thinking them like, sometimes teachers talk about the minds like a puppy, you know. You're training. That's what meditation is. We're training the mind, or like a small child. Another really useful metaphor that I've heard Ajahn Thanissaro use is to think of the mind as a committee. And that's actually very helpful. You know, it's a committee. We don't have one mind, and we know that. We've been watching it enough. It's very fickle and it's moving all over the place. But sometimes when you're stuck in a thought pattern, you know, or you're just really worried or really upset, you can start to talk to the mind and interact with the mind like it's a committee. And then it can get playful. It's something that you can play with, you know, like, oh, it's you again, you know, you know what? You've been sharing your ideas a lot. Is there anyone else, you know, around the table that has an idea? You know, and you can start to, and then you don't take your mind quite so seriously. I found that also very helpful. Yeah.
Just to clarify.
Can you?
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks.
So I think I've heard it maybe here. I think I've heard it maybe here, but we are not all mind. Is that accurate?
We are not who we take ourselves to be. Yeah.
That later.
We're not who we take ourselves to be, and it's true. The mind is like the body, right? It's conditioned. And what we're doing in meditation is reconditioning it.
So who is training the dog? Or what?
You know, it can get into like really recursive circular thinking. I think, and I think that different people would conceive of this differently. You know, what's worked for me is to just realize the mind is conditioned, and that's why it's so crucial in the Dhamma to have good friendship and to come in contact with the Dhamma, because the mind is conditioned, and until we start bringing in wholesome influences, the mind's just, you know, unwholesome. And so I just think of it like that, like because I've been really hung up on this, and I don't know if it's going to help at all. One time I was going for a walk and I looked out in this field and I saw these trees growing, and I didn't and it was just like, it's nature, the trees are growing. And I'm not worried about, well, did they do the growing? Did they will to grow? Did they want to grow? You know, they're just growing and it's nature. And that was helpful for me. It's just nature. And I mean, Utejani has this great thing, you know, it's not your mind, but you're responsible for it. Yeah, please, no, please.
So the way I look at this, because of the way I've been taught, is that we're a verb, not a noun, and that there's nothing solid. There's not some little person inside of here who's Sangamita or whatever, Maritunka, that everything I think and do and how I perceive, it's all been conditioned. And so my job now as a meditator is to become aware of this and become aware of how this verb is acting at this moment. Is that helpful to me? Like, is it bringing me to happiness and peace, or is it screwing me up? You know, making me, yeah. So who's training that dog? Well, it's just this set of conditions
Mhm,
that's present at this
mhm.
moment. And if I don't think, if I have this idea that this training isn't going very well, then maybe I can change,
It's the environment that the dog is in.
yeah,
Mhm.
change some things and, you know,
Mhm.
change it. But anyway, that's how I think of it.
No, that's a great way to think of it. It is the environment that the
But
dog's
the
in,
dog
and
will
that's,
respond to that environment.
and
you
that's
create that
why
environment.
you want to bring in as much wholesome, as much wholesome, as much wholesome. That's why we listen to Dhamma, why we read Dhamma, why we gather together, why we have these kinds of conversations, why we meditate. Yeah, it's all putting in wholesome, wholesome, wholesome. And there's so much unwholesome. You know, it's like a jet plane trying to land, you know, to counteract. So we have like lots of work to do, all of us. Yeah. Yeah. Please, Catherine, you got it. Great.
I think it's similar to what Sandy said, except not so eloquent, but it, sometimes I think for me, it helps to see things from how other different people see them. Each one might resonate with you. But with yoga, like what I've learned is the self that's conditioned, you have a small s, and so I'm very visual, and then the self that's not conditioned is the big S. And so when you meditate, for me, I experience the self, the big S, that's not conditioned, and and it helps me know. Like, so it helps me release those samsaras again, like the samsara that I wasn't good enough, or I need to be productive, or I'm not someone lovable, or any of those kinds of things that you might have been conditioned, and maybe they're different things. Then you meditate and you get to that place where the mind is not busy, and you get to experience, oh, I can have peace without all these other things. I can have joy without all these other things. I can just be without doing. Like, you learn all those things in that sort of space, and you start experiencing the big S. And so then I wonder, does it really matter what the who is?
So that's a great segue into, like, let's talk about the escape. So we've talked a little, and I would really encourage people to be working with this throughout the week, looking at your own, what's the gratification? What's the cost? What's the danger? And let's talk briefly about the escape, the good stuff. We've actually talked about it. The escape is to, you know, recondition the mind with tons and tons of wholesome, and be inclining the mind to the wholesome, you know, and developing more and more beautiful mind states. So a huge escape is to cultivate contentment, because contentment is satisfying. It's here now in the present moment. And it's very, very, very wholesome. It's the greatest countering of craving. It's just to be content. And for myself in meditation, that's when I'm absolutely the most peaceful, when I realize, oh, nothing needs to be different. It's very deep, profound. I don't need to be different. Nothing needs to be different. Contentment. And this is something that the Buddha is telling us to cultivate. And this is the thing I think that we don't understand or get taught, is that, you know, happiness doesn't come from outside. It doesn't come from the experiences and the stuff, and it's a mind state. It comes from inside, you know. So no one can make you happy. It's something that you cultivate. So this is a huge part of the escape, is cultivating tons and tons of contentment, and contentment with our meditation. Speaking to myself right now. Not like, oh, when, you know, no, now. And a lot of contentment with our meditation object, you know, having a beautiful relationship with our meditation object, where we enjoy it. That's when the mind will settle. And this is what the Buddha knows, that it's a path of happiness. You know, you get content, and then you get relaxed, and then you start to have pleasure in the meditation. And then it ends up being a pleasure that's so much better than any sensual pleasure. Marilyn.
Well, getting into that space, we have that content and that peace.
Oh, thanks so much.
In your meditation, we get into that place. My object of meditation is my breath. And so it leads me into that contentment. And now, if I'm in a situation that starts to make me uncomfortable, I just stop myself and just take a couple of breaths. I don't need to go through a full meditation. Just take that breath, 1 or 2 breaths, and it just calms me down. It just, you know, it works. Believe me, it works.
And that's because you've trained the mind. Yeah. Anyone online? Scott.
I use the word contentment as a mantra on the out breath quite often in meditation. Just the word content on the out breath helps a lot.
Yeah. Those words are powerful, you know, peace,
yeah.
Ease, you know, whatever, and content, beautiful. Yeah. And then I'm sure that the whole system starts to, you know, just settle and relax.
Yeah, it works really well.
Great. Yeah, please, Gay.
Tara Brach talks about smiling from within. And I find that imagery, or a smile in the bright blue sky, is really conjures up a sense of contentment.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's so great for people that are visual, you know, it's wonderful. Maybe one more person, and then we're at time. Susan?
She's gone.
Okay. Okay, we're at time anyway. So that's the framework. Yeah, I'll just end with something that is directly from the book, but I thought it was useful. And I just really want us to encourage us to be examining this week, especially craving. You know, is this actually worth craving? Like, is it actually giving me what I thought that it was going to give me? And you can just do that by being really mindful. while you're doing things. So Shyla Catherine writes, sensual pleasures do not need to be obliterated, condemned, or feared, but a committed meditator will learn to meet them with mindfulness, know them with wisdom, contemplate their impermanence, recognize their limitations, and not be compelled by their influence. So, strategy number 2, really weighing the cost, really examining and realizing the ways that we're fooling ourselves and that we're not being completely honest with ourselves, and using more and more wisdom power to direct the mind to more and more contentment and more time on the beautiful track with wholesome mind states, because that has momentum and power. Yeah. And thank you so much for everyone for all your sharing.
Okay, we'll close with the Brahma Vihara of compassion. Do a short reflection on that. So if you first of all want to bring to mind somebody you know who has great physical or mental suffering, and while being aware of their particular difficulties, direct these phrases to them. May you be free of your pain and sorrow. May you find peace. And now we'll send the phrases to ourselves. May I be free of my pain and sorrow. May I find peace. Now bring to mind someone who's been very supportive of you and send the phrases to them. May you be free of your pain and sorrow. May you find peace. Now think of a neutral person, someone you don't have love or hate feelings towards, and send the phrases to them. May you be free of your pain and sorrow. May you find peace. And now bring to mind somebody that you have a difficult relationship with, and send the phrases to them. May you too be free of your pain and sorrow. May you too find peace. May all beings be free of pain and sorrow. May all beings find peace. Remember that all beings face great potential suffering, no matter how fortunate their immediate circumstances may be. This meditation does not eliminate suffering. What we are doing is being able to acknowledge suffering, to open to it and respond to it with a tenderness of heart, which allows us to join with all beings and realize we're never alone. May the merit of our practice be shared with all sentient beings, named and unnamed. Please, Scott, Blair, Ruth, Agnes, Tim, Helen. May all beings be well and happy. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week, a great practice week. And hopefully see you next week.